Hello everybody, welcome to the United Stand, welcome to another interview special. I'm pleased to say we've got Rob Dawson here from ESPN. Rob, as always, thanks for coming on, mate. How are you doing?
No, thanks for having me.
We've got lots to talk about. A lot has been going on since we last spoke on the tour.
Yep.
I'm going to get straight into it. Ten Hag has been talking already. Now we've had this bit of a break. Obviously, games cancelled, internationals coming up. We've been talking about the January transfer window. I'll get into everything else after that, but it looks like Ten Hag is already thinking about making that next step. He's trying to improve his team. He's trying to take us to the next level as soon as possible. January transfer window, mate, it's not usually a time when United would go into the market and spend big. There are rumours that they could possibly be 60, 70 million. I mean, is there any sort of noises on that at all? Can you see anything happening in January? And can you see United changing tack just for the sake of Ten Hag being here at the club now?
To be honest, first things first, I thought it was very interesting that Ten Hag has offered that. Because Ed Woodward used to tell us all the time that the minute that the summer window finishes, the day after that, work starts for the January transfer window. That makes sense because it's the next window that you got to start thinking about. For Ten Hag to offer that up though in an MUFC interview is quite interesting. It was almost like it was quite pointed. He didn't need to say that at all. It was a very open-ended question about what you're going to do with your spare time and all that kind of stuff. And he made a point of mentioning the January transfer window, which suggests that he's really keen to properly attack it and maybe sign one or two players. Do I think it's going to happen? Probably not. I think the general consensus around Man United is that they spent a little bit more than they were planning to in the summer. Probably triggered by what happened in those first two games of the season, that they looked at those and thought, look, we're massively short, we need some bodies in, we need to pay the money that Ajax want for Anthony to get him in, and obviously then they signed Casemiro as well. So I'm not sure there's an awful lot of money left in the budget. That said, I think Ten Hag is the type of manager who will always say that he wants more. I'm sure he's very happy with what they did in the summer and the signings they brought in, that the changes that they were able to make. I just think that he's the type of manager and type of personality to always want more, to always put pressure on the club, to always say, look, we need to explore this, we need to see if we can do something. And particularly with the World Cup right before the January transfer window, there is a chance that a player might appear from somewhere that maybe you haven't seen an awful lot of, but impresses at the World Cup, and you need to be in a position to go and do it if it's possible. So I think it's right that United are looking at it. Do I think that it's likely that they're going to spend a lot of money in January? No. But again, it's the type of thing that United will always say that they never rule out. If something comes up that they want to do and they're in a position to do it, they'll try.
Do you think with the World Cup being early this year, obviously normally you'll see a mad scramble for players that have impressed in the World Cup. You think this is where there's sort of like a heightened attention on January this summer, just simply because of the World Cup being where it is?
It's possible. You can have this massive showcase of football where there's going to be an awful lot of players with a massive stage to impress. As I say, players from all over the world who perhaps aren't at the biggest clubs but are using the World Cup to really impress the bigger clubs, and you have to be in a position as a club like Man United to be able to act on that. It's one of those seasons where no one really knows what's going to happen. We've never been in this position before where there's a World Cup in the middle of the season. It's right before a January transfer window, and you never know. And also from Ten Hag's point of view, because he's never been through this before, you don't know how his own players are going to come back. You don't know how they're going to come back physically. You don't know how they're going to come back mentally. It's entirely possible that United could go on a decent run. They could be up around the top of the table, say, around the January transfer window. And maybe if that happens, and Ten Hag is looking at his squad and thinking, maybe one addition here or one addition there can maybe tip us over the edge and really have us challenging City, he'll probably think that they're going to have to go and do it, which is why, obviously we stood here in September talking about a transfer window months down the line, but that's why he's putting the plans in place now.
That's it. I mean, in terms of you being in around the media and questions being asked to Ten Hag, is there a certain position, areas of United's team that you would think he would go in on more right now?
I think he probably needs a right back. I've been very impressed with Diogo Dalot. I think he's done fantastically well, but I think, judging by the games we've seen so far, I don't think he particularly fancies Aaron Wan-Bissaka. He's had chances to play him and hasn't brought him on. Sheriff, obviously, at the end of that game, you've got Tyrell Malacia playing at right back. Obviously, used to seeing a left back, so it kind of shows the pecking order in that position. I'm not saying that January they need massive changes. I'm not saying that you need massive changes all over the pitch, but it's one of those where you might get the odd player to come in and just to tip the squad over the edge a little bit, just to get them to a different level. I mean, obviously further down the line, I think you're probably going to need a centre forward. The question marks and debate around Ronaldo is still going on, and Anthony Martial's obviously struggling with injury at the moment. I don't think January is really the time to go and spend £100 million on a striker. So maybe that's something that's going to have to wait till the summer. But January is an opportunity to kind of tweak the squad, and I think it's pretty clear that Ten Hag is at the start of building something. I don't think that by any means that he's finished with the signings and the changes he wants to make from the squad. And obviously he's looking at it and thinking, well, if I've got a window that presents you with an opportunity to make changes, then why would you pass that up? And I think that's fair enough.
You touched on it then, Ronaldo. Obviously, is there any possibility? I mean, George Mendes, we know what he's like, we know how he works. He failed this summer because I think ultimately he did put the noises out there. I think he thought something more was going to happen of it. It didn't. Ronaldo's stuck at the club. I'm not scared in saying he's stuck at the club because I do think he wanted to go. Yeah. That's how it came across to me. But do you reckon there is any chance in January, or do you think simply because everyone's like so far into a season, the World Cup, like you said, then it's too much to ask for even to get away in January?
I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, I think it's going to be very difficult for him. I think a lot will depend on what happens between now and January. If he's still playing sort of a bit part role and coming off the bench, obviously that's not a role that he's used to. It's obviously not a role that he would be happy with because he wants to be playing every week, and I understand that. So if he's not really playing, again, it's only right that he would look at other options. And if there is a team perhaps that wasn't that keen in the summer but now has got a little bit more desperate in January, maybe there is an opportunity that arises. Maybe there is an opportunity that a Champions League club who've got through to the knockout stages come in and want to spend the money to try and sign him. I certainly wouldn't rule it out. I just can't see United's stance on that changing particularly. As I say, January's not really the time to be spending massive money on a centre forward, and Erik ten Hag has already said that he needs a big squad this year because of the World Cup, so he hasn't got that many out and out centre forwards. I just find it very hard to believe that Ten Hag is going to look at that squad and go, we can afford to lose Ronaldo. Whether Ronaldo wants to go or not, I think it's fairly well known now that he wanted to go in the summer. He's here for now. I just don't think that we're going to get to January and Ten Hag's going to go, right, I've changed my mind, you can go, particularly without signing anyone else. Yeah,
you touched on it there in terms of like Martial coming into the squad. We've seen he was key in pre-season when we was there watching. I do believe that personally when he comes back in he will be a focal point up front, which leaves the question on Ronaldo. In terms of the start Ten Hag's made, I mean, what have you made of that start? I mean, you've been following United for years now, Rob, and I don't think there's been a worse start to a season that Ten Hag had. Have you been impressed how he's turned that around?
Massively. To be honest, I went to the Brentford game and walking away from Brentford, I was worried for him because I just felt like it was one of those results that suggested that things were unravelling. We saw it a little bit with Louis van Gaal, not to that extent. When he first came in, results didn't go particularly well, and there was always a suggestion that things will get better down the line, it'll be fine eventually, and it just never was. And I just got that. I don't know what it was. I don't know whether it was the manner of the defeat, the performance, what it was, the mood around the club, the noises. But I just walked away from Brentford thinking this could be disastrous, particularly with the games that were to come next with the likes of Liverpool and Arsenal not so long after that. But in fairness, he's proved everyone wrong. It's helped that he's been able to spend a bit of money, brought Casemiro in, brought Anthony in. Obviously, Lisandro Martinez had a little bit of a difficult day at Brentford, but again has turned it round. I think Ten Hag got his team selection for Liverpool in particular spot on. I think that you might look back at that, not the game particularly, but the team selection, and think that was really the moment where he really put his stamp on the squad. That he's gone into a dressing room with Harry Maguire and Cristiano Ronaldo and said, "You're not playing. We're going to drop you. We're going to play with these lads at Liverpool. Go out and get a result." And he did. And the minute that those decisions, those team selections paid off, and they got a good result against Liverpool. Admittedly, I don't think anyone here that night thought that United were going to beat Liverpool. No. I didn't. I mean, I'm happy to admit it. I think once you go and make those decisions and get that kind of result, it sends a massive message to the dressing room that I'm in charge, that it's my way, the highway. And I think it's paid off. The run of games and the run of results that they've had since then have been fantastic. So all credit to him, because, as I say, walking away from Brentford that day, I was worried for him.
Yeah, I touched on a couple of points you made there actually, in terms of like the likes of Maguire, Ronaldo, Shaw. These are full international first team players who would expect to be playing. He's not playing them. Do you reckon that would be sustainable? Do you think Harry Maguire, especially him being the captain, Luke Shaw being put out of place by a new signing coming straight in and he's out of the team, do you reckon that will be essentially the kick up the arse that they need? Do you reckon Ten Hag is the man to actually hold that now and not be forced into bringing these so-called first team players back in just because of who they are and how long they've been at the club, price tag, wages, whatever it may be?
I think so. I was impressed, I must say, with his team selection for Sheriff, because if you're looking at the start of the season, you've dropped. I'm not picking on Harry Maguire, particularly, but I'm using him as an example. You drop Harry Maguire. You probably say to him, look, you're not going to play in the Premier League at the moment, but you are going to play in the Europa League games. He started the Real Sociedad game here. Obviously, then they've had a game called off at Palace. Europa League hasn't started particularly well, and then he's got a decision to make then. He either picks his first choice team at Sheriff, or he brings back the likes of Maguire. And he says to Harry Maguire, you're not playing. You're going to be on the bench again away at Sheriff. Again, probably he looked at and thought he was going to start. And I thought that sent a massive message that players aren't just going to play for the sake of it. And that's for a manager to come in a new job, in a new role, and say that to established internationals. The club captain of Man United is massive. And I think as long as results are going well, Harry Maguire, Luke Shaw, there's no comeback really. If the team is losing and they're not playing well, then you expect a knock on the door from these players saying, look, I need to get back in. The team isn't playing well, we're not winning, I need to get back in. But as long as the team is winning and the decisions that Ten Hag is making are paying off, I don't think there's much they can say. And at the moment, they're just going to have to sit there and bide the time and wait for the chance, because ultimately, if you're playing at a club like Man United, you don't expect to start every week. And if you are expected to start every week, you shouldn't be here. That's the bottom line of it. I've seen David May over there at Hotel Football before I came over here, and as a player who had to compete with the likes of Jaap Stam and Ronnie Johnson, the lad started an FA Cup final against Newcastle in the treble year, and then 3 days later knows he's on the bench for a Champions League final. But that's just the way it is here. All the way through history, the United's best teams have been about the size of the squad, and players being desperate to get back in and performing on the training pitch and forcing their way back in. And that's the only way Harry Maguire and the others are going to get back in, is by playing well at training every day, when they get the opportunities playing well. And ultimately, if the team is winning, you're not in the team, you haven't got much to shout about.
That's it. It's like he can back that up with what he's done, because he made that goal against Sheriff, and we had that bad start against Sociedad. It was a horrible night with everything going on and off the pitch and everything like that, but it could have gone so much the other way. It's like if we went into the international break off the back of 2 Europa League defeats, he pretty much stamped his authority on the team there, like you said. We came away with that, a comfortable 2-0 win away from home, our third clean sheet away from home in a row. There's no argument really in what he's done, and he pretty much put the Europa League argument to bed. I can fully concentrate now on going into the City game when we do get back. I mean, it's like you said then, it's like you cannot ignore what he's done, and the players have got no excuse.
I think that one of the key things, regardless of whatever happened on the pitch, in the actual games, and one of the biggest things that Ten Hag needed to do is to show that he was the manager, he was the boss. Everyone will know. I'm not going to get into all the stuff that happened last season. Everyone will know there was issues in the dressing room last year. Started under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, got worse under Ralph Rangnick, and it didn't help.
Do you feel like the mood has changed within the squad from what you're hearing?
Well, yeah, definitely. Definitely. I mean, there are still players who aren't playing, who aren't happy, and that's fine. You don't want players who aren't playing to be happy about it, and that's kind of it goes back to the competition thing that we were saying before. That you need players not to be happy. You need them to want to compete for a place, and that's great to have that. But I just think the mood around the place is completely changed. In the dressing room, outside the dressing room, it obviously helps that you're winning games. Everyone would say that. Even last season, people say the only way to change the mood is to win games, and obviously that wasn't happening. It was just getting worse and worse. I think if you're winning games, everything is fine. The issue becomes if results aren't going well, and there's going to be stages of this season, because it's a new squad and a new manager. There are going to be stages where you can probably go 3 or 4 games without a win, and that's when it becomes really important for the manager to keep a grip on discipline. Really keep a grip of the mood in the dressing room, and again stamp his authority on it. But so far, ultimately Erik Ten Hag hasn't put a foot wrong. And I think that's the different stages of the summer, particularly after Brighton and Brentford. I think a lot of fans were looking at it thinking, "Oh, I'm not sure about this," and rightly so. But you have to say, sitting here now in September, results going well, players playing well, you have to say that he's not really put a step wrong.
No, that's it. I mean, that big change did come after them bad results against Brighton. I mean, I've said it many a times, Rob. I said, look, he's the first manager to realise straight away, instantly, and change it. I mean, that 9-day gap between Brentford and Liverpool, I think that helped. What he did on the training ground, we all heard him putting the miles in with the players, if that was true or not. But it does look like something happened in them 9 days. There was, whether it was a crisis meeting or anything, I don't know. But like you said, you cannot complain, and you can't really criticise him for what he's done. He took it on face on, and actually turned it around massively. And do you know what, it was like, and I just want to get your opinion on this one. It's like, with the Glazer out movement and everything like that, it all seemed to coincide with the unrest with the fans. I know you was out here when the protests were going on before the Liverpool game. That combined with the start of the season, we had the Arnautovic and Rabiot sort of rumours and dealings, and all of a sudden, bang, Casemiro, Antony. Do you reckon the actual Glazer out movement had any sort of, and the unrest in the fan base had anything to do with how the club spent money on that?
I wouldn't be surprised. because as I say, I know you were out here as well before that Liverpool game, and it felt like the mood had really turned. Obviously, those two results hadn't gone well. Brentford, in particular, was a disaster. The Frenkie de Jong thing was rumbling on, and United were looking like they were going to be made to look stupid with that. Then there was Liverpool that were turning up. I think people were fearing the worst a little bit after what had happened the previous season with that 4-0 and the 5-0, and thinking, United could get smashed here. And if that was to happen, I don't know, God knows what would have happened. And it did feel like a bit of a turning point. As I say, I thought Ten Hag got his team selection in particular bang on, because if he'd made those decisions and they'd still gone out there and lost 5-0, the vultures would have properly been circling, and they already were a little bit. So yeah,
are you one of them, mate?
well, no, yeah, probably yeah. To be honest,
it's realistic.
It is. I was, as I say, walking away from Brentford, I was worried. Not just because of the performance, also because of what was happening recruitment-wise. I was concerned that lots of the targets were either from Ajax or Dutch, and it looked like they were concentrating on a very, very small pool of players, that it was all being left to Ten Hag. And again, I'd have to admit, standing here now, that I was wrong about that, because I was worried about that they were looking at a very, very small pool, and that all the pressure on recruitment was on his shoulders, and that if those players if they'd come in and not played well, that it would have been very, very difficult to look at Erik Ten Hag and say, you've got those decisions right and you deserve to stay longer. But in fairness, he's backed himself to pick the right players. They've come in, and so far, the likes of Lisandro Martinez, Christian Eriksen, Anthony, you've got to say that they've all paid off, and I think that just shows his personality.
That's it.
Because it would have been very easy for him to come in from a club like Ajax. With all due respect to Ajax, they're not a club the size of Man United. It would have been very easy for him to delegate a lot of that and say, look, you've got your processes in place, you've got your own scouting department, your own recruitment processes, I'll let you handle that. I obviously want to say, but you come to me with these players and I'll sort of give my input. Instead, he's walked in and he says, no, I'm not having these players. I want this lad from Ajax, I want this other lad from Ajax, and I don't care if it costs 100 million euros, I want him in and I want him signed. He's the kind of player I want. And he's backed himself. And to be honest, beyond anything else, I think the fact that he's been able to come in and have that confidence to say that and to treat the backroom staff in that kind of way, that he's the boss and whatever he says goes, and he's the man that's going to decide all this stuff. Because ultimately, if it goes wrong, he's the one that gets the stick. We wouldn't be stood here talking about backroom staff at United getting it wrong and they're the ones that have to go. We'd be stood here saying that Erik Ten Hag has to go, and he's backed himself to get it right. And so far, again, very, very early, but so far, you have to say that he's got it right.
He has. On the pitch, when it's going well, takes the focus off everything else. Off the pitch, there's still problems, mate. And obviously, being fans, and you've seen exactly what it brings. I mean, the investment that's needed in this place, we all know, doing well. There's the debate whether or not. I mean, all season ticket holders were sent a message and an email saying, would you rather regenerate Manchester United's Old Trafford or would you move for a new stadium? We've had all that talk. We've seen the lack of investment until, like we just said then, it really hit home that we were struggling and we got the investment in. Is this another false dawn with Sir Jim Ratcliffe, in your opinion, coming in, or do you feel like this is probably the biggest movement or biggest sort of like sign that there is a possibility the Glazers will actually buckle? But again, adding to that though, Rob, it's like you said, if results are good on the pitch, it takes the focus completely off what's going on off it. And we've seen that recently. Do you feel like there is any significant movement behind the scenes in terms of what's going on?
I mean, I think in terms of Sir Jim Ratcliffe, I think for the first time, he looks like a viable buyer in terms of the wealth that he's got behind him. And I don't think, even with the money he's got behind him, I don't think it would be a case that he could come in and buy it outright. It would need investors. It would need some kind of consortium that would need to come together. But I think for the first time there is a viable buyer. The viable option, because in the past, I know that fans have looked and have been desperate for the Glazers to leave for years and years, and I get that. But for that to happen, you need a viable option to come and take over. And I think for the first time, maybe Sir Jim Ratcliffe offers that. I don't think that it's particularly far down the line. I think if you speak to people close to Sir Jim, that he would tell you that they've not heard anything at all, and that their option is there, and they're kind of waiting, because ultimately you can't buy something that's not for sale. And at the moment, there's been no suggestion that it is for sale. I think from my point of view, the most worrying thing in terms of the Glazer ownership is that we're talking about redeveloping Old Trafford, or the investment that's needed in Old Trafford. And Richard Arnold has said himself in that meeting with fans at the start of the summer that the money isn't there for that. That they're going to need outside investment to come in and help fund it. And really, for a club of Man United's size, with the commercial arm that they've got, the money that they generate, that really shouldn't be a problem. The fact that money's not there is worrying.
You feel like on the pitch has to get better. Champions League season after season has to be there before we can even go for investment now, because we've seen sponsors start to, I won't say buckle completely, but we've seen it sort of like drop off a little bit in terms of like how much we get investment wise through that. Do you feel like United have to concentrate first about getting it right on the pitch and then look at maybe going from there?
They do. I mean, ultimately it depends what your, it depends, as a fan, it depends what your goal is. I think if you're desperate for the Glazers to leave, I think the sponsorship or the main sponsors wavering a little bit about wanting to be associated with Man United isn't a bad thing, because that's the only way that the Glazers are going to end up leaving.
I agree.
Ultimately, at the moment, they're still taking tens of millions of pounds out whenever they want for not doing very much. And as long as they can do that, you kind of wonder why would they ever want to sell. But if sponsors do start to waver, fans, I'm not suggesting that fans ever stop turning up, because I think that's a massive commitment for a fan. I think it's a little bit too much, to be honest, to expect a fan who's probably, some people's lives are entirely built around this place, and to tell them to stop coming, I think is a massive ask. But in terms of sponsors, if they were to start wavering and to stop investing, I think possibly the Glazers would look at it and go, well, we can't be bothered with the hassle, and that's the only really thing that I can see triggering them selling it. So, I mean, look, ultimately, fans turn up at Old Trafford to watch a great team play well and win stuff, and I completely get that. If that's happening, I'm not really sure that the Glazers ever leave, which again is a frightening prospect, because I think everyone can see that really for this club really to move on to the next level, that really can't happen under the way that the Glazers own it at the moment.
Yeah, true. I totally agree with everything you said there, Rob. It's hard for a fan not to come. It's hard for a fan not to come and support the team that we've grown up watching week in, week out. I'm one of them. It is difficult for me, but I mean, I can't see it happening. It's like just under $250 million investment in the squad this summer. I mean, if they did that every single summer, it's going to move away some of the fans, the distributors, away from actually wanting the Glazers out. It's just the way people work.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and that's natural. That, I mean, I think in fairness to the protests at the moment, they've made a point of saying that it doesn't matter what happens on the pitch. It was very easy for everyone to come and protest before the Liverpool game, because things were an absolute disaster at that point. I think that they need to keep up that momentum. They need to. I know it's harder to protest and stand out here when things are going well on the pitch, and it is easy to get distracted by 200 million being spent in the transfer window.
True.
And I don't think that's a criticism. It's a natural thing. It is easy to get distracted by that kind of thing. I think if they can keep the momentum up, keep the singing in the stadium, keep making sure that the television cameras are picking up the banners, picking up the songs, that's all you can do. It is hard. I'm certainly not suggesting that it's an easy thing to do. You just have to come and turn up on a match day, and you've got little kids who are desperate to go in the mega store to buy a Marcus Rashford Man United shirt. It's like, how do you explain to an 8-year-old kid about leverage buyouts and you can't have a shirt because it was a leverage buyout and we don't want to put money in the Glazers' pocket? The kid just wants the Rashford shirt. It's hard. It's hard because ultimately this place is a massive part of people's lives. You just have to hope that at some stage the pressure builds to such a point that the Glazers decide that they don't want anything to do with it, and at that point there's someone like Sir Jim Ratcliffe or whoever else, someone with the money and the means and the vision to come in and take over, and hopefully one day we could be stood here talking about new owners.
That's it. I mean, I've cleared all that up. We talked about all of that. Before you go, Rob Doe, expectations going forward, 2 months into the season. We talked on the tour in pre-season, I think it was Australia, where we did our interview, and we said top 4 would be an ask for United. It would be overachieving. From what you've seen so far, like you spoke about there with Ten Hag, turning it around, good signs. The investment that we didn't expect to come has come from that point that we spoke. Do you feel like United have got a chance of getting top 4 now? Do you feel like we could do more than what we expected when we was on pre-season?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, since we spoke last time, it probably was in Australia, wasn't it? That there has been investment in the squad. Good players have arrived. Players who have seemed to have settled quite quickly.
Decisions made that we didn't expect. Yeah.
Obviously, results have picked up. Results against Liverpool and Arsenal in particular are very eye-catching. Suggests that on any given day United can compete with those teams. I think crucially as well, the likes of Chelsea, Liverpool haven't started well at all. I expected them two really, along with City, to be right in the top 4, and then you get to a point where maybe the last place, that fourth place, is decided by another 3 teams. I think actually at the moment, standing here now, City are clearly the standout team in the league, but the rest of the other 5, United, Chelsea, Arsenal, Spurs, Tottenham, I don't think there's that much between them, to be honest. I think you could probably make a case. I don't think you could probably make a case for each one of them finishing second and each one of them finishing 6th. And I think we're in that. Obviously, it's still very early, but I think we're in that position. I think I could easily see United stood here now finishing second. They could easily finish 6th. I just think that United need to keep putting a run together, build on the momentum that they've already started. Hopefully they come back from the international break with a fully fit squad. There is a tough run of games in between the end of the international break and the start of the World Cup. The World Cup again, throws everything up in the air. No one really knows who's going to come back, in what condition. It could just be a funny season. And I actually think in terms of winning the title, I think obviously we've seen recently that you need kind of 98, 99, 100 points to win it. I don't think that'll be the case this year. I think if that drops towards sort of mid-80s, I think that would really, really suit Man United. I don't think they're a team who can rack up 100 points. I don't think they're good enough that yet, but I think they could possibly get towards sort of high 70s, mid-80s. If they were to do that, they would. I would think they would be right in amongst the proper title challengers. I'm not suggesting that they're anywhere near City and could really win the title, but if they were to finish right up there and really push them, I think that would be a fantastic season.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting if we could speak again after this next group of games and the World Cup starts. Then we'd probably be able to judge it, but you heard it there. Rob Dawson said United are going to finish second.
Obviously going to come and bite me now, never mind.
Yeah, but no, I think we'll know a lot more after this next bunch of fixtures, especially just before the World Cup, because everything will be settled then. Europe will be dealt with. But guys, that pretty much sums up everything for this show. I just want to Rob, cheers for coming on as always, mate.
No, thanks,
very insightful. Get your comments in below, everyone. Do you agree with what me and Rob have been saying? Post your comment below, obviously. Give the video a like, subscribe to the United Stand, and cheers for watching, everybody. We'll be back again with more videos like this and more interviews going forward now up until we kickstart. And like Rob says, then we beat City and we're well on for second in the league. Cheers for watching, everyone.